about last week where he has played a little bit better. What a pass by Rondo.
That might be the dagger.
Why not? Why can't I be the MVP of the league? Why can't I be the best player in the league?
The Lakers repeat back-to-back titles. The LA Lakers, the 2010 NBA champions.
The 9 best small forwards of the 2010s after LeBron James. Let's go ahead and get that out of the way. There was no suspense with number 1 here. There's also no suspense about the best app you'd use to get your tickets, the SeatGeek app. The SeatGeek app pulls tickets from all over the web, so buying is really easy, and it also assures you'll be getting the best value for your ticket. While doing your search, each ticket is ranked with a score from 1 to 100 that lets you know if you're getting a good deal or not for your purchase. And on top of that, it gives you a detailed view of what you would actually see from your seat if you were actually there. If you're interested in this app, the link to download will be in both the comment section and the description. Consider using my promo code DOM2K to get 20% off your first purchase. So you assumed Luol Deng would not appear on this list. Or maybe you assumed he would. Either way, he belongs because the 2010 small forward list is nowhere near as stacked as you'd think. It's way more top heavy, but out here in the back, there's some guys that just kind of default here. Not to say Deng wasn't a good player, it's just that the bulk of his best days were in the mid to late 2000s, despite his only 2 All-Star teams coming at the start of this decade. So with the All-Star teams, the decent scoring average, and the all-defensive second team in 2012, he pretty much beats out any other small forward you would have thought about having at the 10th spot. That being said, this will be as high as he goes because he pretty much flamed out by 2015 when he was still just 29 years old. I know, right? When I saw that he'd retired this year, I thought he was like 40, but he's called it quits after turning just 34 in April. I guess that's an appropriate age for a role player, but still. The fact that he's kind of been just collecting a check since he turned 30 is surprising, and definitely only good enough for 10 here. For all the headlines Hayward made concerning the Celtics since 2017, he's got a surprisingly flat resume as a small forward. He's got 1 All-Star team and 1 All-Star team. Rounding out his days in Utah, he was mostly just a really good scorer, which made him a big deal as a free agent joining a young Celtics team that had also acquired Kyrie Irving and Jason Tatum in the same summer. Coming from being an All-Star in the West, he'd likely have about 3 All-Star appearances total after his bids in the East, but, you know, snapped legs and stuff. Still, he deserves his spot above Deng because Deng was basically finishing his best days earlier in the 2010s before burning out to a bench warmer relatively quickly. Meanwhile, Hayward was just starting out his career and naturally he was getting better. On top of that, he's back to being a starter this year for the Celtics and is already looking a lot more confident than he was last year, so it looks like he's probably going to finish this decade on a high note. In any case, like I said, the requirements for the back portion of this list are pretty low. He missed an entire season, then rehabbed on the court for another, but he's still 9th, so there you go. Chris Middleton has basically just been coming along since the middle of the 2010s, and naturally because he was only around 23 years old. He's been a consistent scorer and shooter ever since, while just recently becoming an All-Star and co-star to Giannis on the Bucks. And that's literally where this description stops. It's basically like splitting hairs between he and Hayward, and he's been healthy the last few years on top of being a good scorer before he really reached star status, and this season it looks like he and Hayward may be competing on somewhat of a level playing field. It would be no surprise to see both of them become All-Stars. But yeah, you could literally almost interchange this 8th and 9th spot. It really does not matter, to be honest. Let's go ahead and get to the interesting stuff. So, were Middleton and Hayward probably better players and bigger names throughout this decade considering that Iggy went to Golden State's bench in 2015, cutting his scoring averages to single digits the rest of the way? Yeah, sure, probably. However, you have to take a look at what's really happened here. Iggy started the 2010s on Philly where he was A, an all-star for a season, and B, a player that could put up decent scoring numbers when he was asked, and defend, all while being one of the better players on the team. He also helped lead Philly to within 1 game of the Eastern Conference Finals in 2012. After he went to Denver, that's where he started being a part of teams that were truly striving for something, and that's also where his talents began to be fitted for specific roles to help said teams. In doing so, he wound up with with 2 all-defensive teams, one of which was a first team in 2014, and a Finals MVP as he was able to force LeBron to an inefficient scoring output in the 2015 series. After that, he was basically a crucial defensive piece for the Warriors, providing a bit of scoring and playmaking on the side to help them win 2 more titles. So again, with a look at the entire decade, would Middleton and Hayward be bigger, more talented names that you'd want to start on a contending team? Yeah, probably. Would they rank over Andre Iguodala when you sum up everything they did over the decade? It'd be a really tough argument to make.
Chasing that farewell tour, they don't love you like that.
By 17, by 46, is at 144.98. Victory here in Oakland, and by 13 earlier.
It's really a damn shame that Pierce felt the need to get into a barking match with Draymond Green when one of his main attributes was being loud and talking trash. It's also a shame he felt the need to start a debate centered around his ranking relative to Dwayne Wade as he was getting his farewell tour that he never got himself. It's all good though, I'm not roasting a fellow Celtic, and I think the 6th spot in the 2010s is appropriate for him. He came into them finishing off his best days that began in the early 2000s, and he was still a top small forward at the time, helping lead Boston to the finals once more, and still going toe-to-toe with LeBron James in their matchups. But after he was traded to Brooklyn, it was downhill from there, except for one very brief and bright moment in Washington that helped remind us why we called him the truth. It probably would have been best for him to end it right there, but then he decided to chase another ring with Doc Rivers in LA, which resulted in him riding the bench and driving his averages down. So in summary, he had the talent and all-star appearances to rank above everyone on the list so far, but nowhere near enough to touch any of the top 5. Strap in because now the requirements are legit. Yes, Carmelo Anthony was once really good at basketball. Do not let Twitter lie to you. As a matter of fact, starting the 2010s, he was one of the hottest commodities for teams looking to be pushed over the top into that contending realm. He was finishing off his best days in Denver before being shipped to New York, where things got a little better, then really bad. Still, he was able to rack up 8 All-Star appearances throughout the decade, 3 more All-NBA teams, and a scoring title in 2013 where he ranked 3rd in MVP voting, and probably had the best year of his career. That was also surprisingly the only scoring title he'd ever won. He had to beat out Kevin Durant for those honors, just to give you an idea for those that for some reason think he was just a gimmick. Now, once he chose the money in 2014 and his hometown I guess, that was effectively the end of his career. He barely played any more meaningful basketball afterwards, and had a less than graceful exit from the league after his defense was completely exposed in OKC. Even with that, he was definitely good enough and did enough to rank over any small forward we've mentioned so far for this decade, and he could have possibly been 4th if the burnout wasn't so epic. Because the burnout was so epic, I believe Paul George was able to pass him up on this list for the decade. He's got 6 All-Star appearances, all of which he undoubtedly deserved, and he raked in 10 All-League teams, 4 of which were defensive. The most impressive part about that is that he was able to make an All-NBA and All-Defensive team directly after he returned for a full season from the broken leg. He's been a great scorer, led the only legitimate Eastern challenger to LeBron James after the Celtics left, and then he put together an MVP campaign last season that was derailed due to injury. He's one of those stars that everybody should be thankful for because we take for granted how easily he could have been just another what if. So yeah, being a superstar on both sides of the ball through injury and still raking up the accolades definitely places him ahead of Melo, and rightfully in the 4th spot. The only reason he's not higher at this point is the lack of an MVP or a title, and you absolutely have to have one or both to crack the top 3 here. This is where it gets legendary. Kawhi Leonard is 3rd. I know some of you were disappointed. You wanted me to be sort of edgy and put him in front of KD, and I'm just not gonna do it. But we'll talk more about that in the next spot. To me, Kawhi at the 3rd spot is not even debatable, because his 2014 Finals MVP seems to have this sort of effect on people, making them think that he was far better than he actually was. Kawhi was a role player when he won that award. Just as in 2013 when Danny Green nearly won it because he was the hottest player on a team that was on the doorstep of winning the title, Kawhi simply had the biggest impact on that finals, scoring well and pressuring LeBron James enough so that he wasn't as effective as his numbers would suggest. That Finals MVP causes people to forget that he was averaging 12 points a game until 2015 and didn't become an All-Star until 2016. That Finals MVP causes people to forget that he wasn't even the Kawhi we know of right now until around 2017. He's literally been on this nice and steady trend to becoming the player that he is today. He was not this incredible superstar throughout the entire decade. He improved to what he is. this. Kawhi Leonard was not a better player than Carmelo Anthony until around 2015. He's only got 3 All-Star appearances in his career so far because of the time it took him to improve, and because of whatever happened that year in San Antonio. I'm not saying any of this to down what he's done. I'm laying it all out there for the people that are either trying to rewrite history or move him up too high too fast. He's more than deserving of a top 3 spot here. 2 Finals MVPs, 2 titles, 2 Defensive Player of the Years, and 9 All-League teams, with 2 of those being All-NBA first teams and 5 defensive teams. His playoff run last year, after just 1 season with the Raptors, is amongst one of the greatest and most iconic runs of all time. But I'd just like to remind everybody that A, he's only 28, and B, he's improved to where he is now, and still has room for plenty of more accomplishments. But we're not going to pretend that 2019 Kawhi was the one that just played this entire decade. And regardless of how you feel about Kevin Durant, there is almost no argument whatsoever without bias that he is not second here. KD started the decade as the league's best scorer and grew that list to 4 scoring titles. He's got an All-Star appearance literally every season of this decade. He's likely been a top 5 player since around 2012 and maybe even before that. He's been All-NBA first team 6 times and second team for the rest. He has an MVP, never ranked lower than top 5 in MVP voting while in OKC in a healthy season, during the 2010s of course, and has never not ranked in MVP voting this decade when healthy, only falling down the list because he joined Golden State. He then went on to win 2 titles and 2 Finals MVPs there, and that's precisely where the shit starts. Look, next to nobody respects those titles with the Warriors, okay? We get that, but they still count. He was the force that put them over the top from being just a historic team to probably the most talented and greatest team of all time. But even without those titles, the argument that Kawhi was legitimately better than KD had no real merit behind it until around 2017. And that's my point when I'm comparing these two. Not that Kawhi has never been enough, but it's that he bloomed during this decade while KD came into it as that guy. So while consistently competing to be the best player in the league throughout the entire decade, and having all the accolades to go with it, you can't in good faith place a 3-time All-Star above him. Now, who's gonna rank higher by the time it's all said and done? Hell, Kawhi really might, especially with his titles being more respected and the fact that he's in a better position to end up with more. But who ranks higher in this single decade? It's Kevin Durant, love him or hate him. Number 1 is LeBron James, love him or hate him. I don't even feel the need to actually list anything here because it's just not a discussion. His resume is more about his placing on the all-time list and whether he is the greatest player of all time or not. So it just seems super inconsequential to even have to justify why he's the best small forward of this decade. Fam, he's the best player of this decade. Let's just go ahead and ruin that list too. Championships, MVPs, 3-1 comeback, 17 seasons still dominating, bro. Just go watch like one of the million videos I have on LeBron over the last 4 years. The arguments are all there. If you have any objections, you can take them up with me on Twitch. I'll likely be streaming tomorrow morning, but definitely Sunday morning if not tomorrow. Twitch link is in the comment section and description, so come through and talk basketball for 5 minutes before the chat devolves. Also make sure to hit the like button, comment, and sub on this video if you enjoyed, and be sure to also hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications every time an episode of NBA 2010s drops. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.